Hey guys, welcome to the technical article downloaded from Advanced Auditing and Assurance from ACCA Associate for Chartered Certified Accountancy Exams. This technical article will guide you for the accounting issues and the risk treatments, how it will be impacted on the financial statement. Starting with this article, in the Advanced Auditing and Assurance exam, you will be required to discuss accounting issues in many contexts. It could be that during planning, you are asked to identify areas of audit risk or risk of material misstatement arising from accounting issues. You may be expected to discuss accounting issues and their treatment in a completion question where the appropriateness of the treatment is considered or risk exists. Accounting issues could arise in reporting questions where there may be an impact on the auditor's report and a type of opinion which will be given. This is not the exhaustive list. This may contain some accounting issues which are simple, such as inventory. So, in inventory, how is the accounting done? Accounting it at the cost or net realizable value, whichever is lower. However, there may be some complex areas such as employees benefit, stock options, that is your share options, or your financial instruments, so on. This article brings forward a sound knowledge of financial reporting, which is crucial when preparing for the Advanced Auditing and Assurance exam. Some of these areas are very straightforward, some requires the complexity as discussed. The purpose of this article is to understand the questions asked in your Advanced Auditing and Assurance exam, their illustration on the accounting issues and how they are examined in the questions, and how to recap the accounting treatment on different areas being asked. The examiner in this article has given two examples, one with impairment and the second one with intangible asset. Starting with the impairment, which is your IS 36 impairment of asset. The content in this is the scope and applicability, definitions, indicators of impairment, recognition of impairment loss, identification of the cash generating unit, frequency of impairment, and disclosures. The scope and applicability. An asset is impaired when the sum of estimated future cash flows from that asset is less than the book value. The scope covers all the different types of assets other than the following, as these are covered separately in different IAS, such as inventories, construction contract, deferred tax asset, employees benefit, financial asset, investment property measured at fair value, biological asset, deferred acquisition cost, and intangible asset arising from insurer's contractual right under insurance contract, and non-current asset classified as held for sale. The definition of impairment loss is the amount by which the carrying amount of an asset or cash generating unit exceeds the recoverable amount. So, if the carrying amount of the asset is higher than the recoverable amount, then in such cases impairment loss arises. So, the carrying amount is the balance sheet value which is shown in your asset side. Cost less depreciation, and the recoverable amount we will be covering. Recoverable amount is the higher of the fair value less cost of disposal. Fair value is the price that will be received to sell an asset. So, for example, if the company wishes to sell in the open market, then at what price it will be able to sell and it will be able the customers to fetch in the market, it is your fair price, that is your fair value. And the cost of disposal, These are the incremental costs directly attributable to the disposal of an asset or cash generating unit, excluding finance cost and income tax expenses. So basically, all those costs which are required to make the sale transaction, like bringing the asset from X location to Y location, which is required for making the sale transaction possible. Movement charges, which are required. So these are all your cost of disposal. However, care shall be taken that the finance cost and income tax expenses are excluded. What is value in use? Value in use is the present value of the future cash flows expected to be derived from an asset or cash generating unit. So value in use is the value which will be derived if the asset is used by the organization. For example, it is the estimated cash flows over the period of years. So for example, in year 1, it will the value in use, the cash flows will be X amount. In the year 2, it will be Y amount. In year 3, it will be Z amount. So in these cases, since this is the time factor required, so it has to be discounted using the appropriate rate to bring it to the present value. And this is your value in use of the asset or the cash generating unit. So we are repeating what is cash generating unit. So let's start with what is this. Well, the cash generating unit or CGU is the smallest identifiable group of assets that generate cash inflows and that are largely independent of the cash inflows from other asset or group of asset. So well, this cash generating unit is the smallest identifiable group and it has the capability to generate cash inflows separately. It can be independently be identified. It can be separated from the other asset or group of assets. So this is your cash generating unit. And the recoverable value is the higher of the fair value less cost of disposal or value in use. Now we are starting with the impairment testing. When is the impairment required? Impairment is done at each reporting date if the indicators arises. So what are these indicators? The indicators can be external indicators or the internal indicators. Starting with the external indicators, we can see that external factors which have an impact on the value of the asset are termed as the external indicators. Those factors which are related to your political factors, environmental, ecological, social factors, technological factors, legal factors, then these are termed as your external indicators. So for example, if your political instability is there, then our organization which is situated in that unstable political situation won't be able to do the transaction with other nations, other countries, because there will be not the goodwill will be affected, because this political factors plays a very important role. And if these political factors are unstable or the policies are not being taken which is in the good interest of each others, then it creates some burden on the stakeholders which are situated in other nations or countries or part of the geographical. So this affects this and have the impact of affecting the sales, profitable transactions, contracts, agreements, so on. So these are your external indicators. And those internal indicators such as your obsolescence or physical damage of an asset, sometimes it may happen that your asset got physically damaged, then it will unnecessarily has to reduce the market value and the carrying amount will be more, because the carrying amount is your value when it was being purchased and that time it was being purchased new, and along with it a depreciation is being charged, so certain value is being reduced. However, if the asset is physically damaged, then it will completely lose its value in the market. It won't be able to fetch that price which the organization is expecting. And these are internal factors affecting the asset quality value. Other than this, there are many, like discontinuation or restructuring plans are going on, amalgamation, then some other external reconstruction is going on, mergers. An asset is not being used for a quite number of time, then the asset quality will be deteriorated, and sometimes it may has to incur a huge repairs and maintenance, and this will unnecessarily increase the cost of the asset, but it will not be able to fetch that price because the asset is already worn and torn out. Sometimes it may happen that the plans of disposal of an asset by the organization, or reassessing that the useful life of the asset as finite rather than indefinite, or internal reporting system showing that the prediction that actual performance is not as per your budgeted plans, then in such cases your expected performance from a particular asset or business unit will unnecessarily have an internal indicators on the asset value to be reduced. These are some of the indicators, external as well as the internal indicators. And so if such indicators arises, then the asset impairment testing is done at each reporting date, and annually it is done for goodwill or those intangible assets which have an indefinite useful life or not available for use. So these are some of the cases. Now, how determining the fair value less cost of sale? The fair value is the market price, as we have already discussed earlier, that it is the price that will be received to sell an asset. So this is your fair value. And now the cost of disposal, as we have already understood, that it is the cost directly attributable to the disposal of an asset or cash generating unit, excluding the finance cost and income tax expenses. So we are moving with one example, such as legal cost, stamp duty, cost of removal of the asset, other direct incremental cost for bringing an asset into the condition for its sale, that is the movement charges. Here there is one question of which the value, that is the sale price, is $1 lakh. A fee of $1,000 for providing the valuation is being charged. X will need to dismantle the asset and ship it to any buyer, and the dismantling and shipping charges will be $5,000, and the specialist packaging will cost a further $4,000 and a legal fees of $1,500. Now this charges which are already being charged, that is the sunk cost, is not being taken in your fair value less cost of disposal, because it's already being charged. These are already sunk cost, and it is not going to increase the value and for determination of the fair value. So those costs other than these, such as shipping cost, which will need to dismantle an asset and ship to a buyer if there is a disposal going to take place, then this cost 5,000, 4,000 against your packaging and legal fees 1,500 will be incurred, and these are reduced from the fair value less cost of disposal, that is from 1 lakh. And this around the fair value gives you the figure of $89,500. Now this we have understood of the recoverable amount, which is the higher of the fair value less cost of disposal. Again we have understood fair value less cost of disposal. Now we are understanding what is the fair value. We are understanding value in use. The value in use can be estimated, and there are 3 steps. First, understanding what are the cash flows. The cash flows can be adjusted using the discounting rate or the cash flows. And understanding the step 2 is determining the discounting rate. The discounting rate can be your weighted average cost of capital, or the special rates discounted rate, or if not the specific special rates, Then a general borrowing rate can be the discounting rate, and the discounting rate shall be pre-tax rate, and the following factors shall be considered while determining the tax rate, such as a current market assessment of the time value of money and the risk specific to the asset or cash generating unit. So if we are preparing this statement to understand what is the value in use, so in this an example is given that in year 1 the cash flow is expected to be 5550, and year 2 and year 3 the same. And in discounting rate, the discounting rate is can be determined at your x percentage, and in this instance I have taken 10 percentage, which is your discounting rate. So in this discounting rate for the year 1 can be calculated by 1 upon 1 plus the discount rate power is to 1 year. For the second year it's second, and in year 3 it's taken. And then we can come to this value in use figure through year 1 into the discounting rate, which is a present value, and here this amount of around 13723 is your value in use figure. So this is your 13723.14. It's your value in use, which we have to see with your cost of sale, fair value less cost of disposal, and the higher of the two is considered to be your recoverable value. So this is the question: an asset fair value 5 lakh, cost of disposal 30,000, cash flow 1,10,000 for 5 years dollar. The discounting rate 10%. Recoverable amount is the higher of the fair value less cost of disposal or value in use. Fair value less cost of disposal is your 5 lakh dollar less dollar 30,000, which is your cost of disposal, which gives you a figure of dollar 4,70,000, which we have to compare with the present value of the future cash flow, which is each year the cash flow is expected around dollar 1,10,000 for 5 years, which gives you a present value of 3.7907 multiplied by the cash flow of each year gives you a dollar 4,16,986 figure. So the value in use is dollar 4,16,986. The recoverable amount is the higher of the two, which is dollar 4,70,000. The carrying amount of the CGU, as we have understood earlier, that the cash generating unit is your smallest identifiable group, and it carries an independent of the cash flows, and it can be separately identifiable from other assets or the group of asset. They are independent and can generate the cash flows. So this includes your directly attributable asset, the goodwill, the share of corporate asset, and which we have to reduce it by the liabilities, and changes in the working capital. Now the allocation of the impairment loss is first identified and allocated to the goodwill, and the balance on the pro rata basis to the other asset. However, the care should be taken that impairment loss is not adjusted against the current figure, current assets or current liabilities, that is the net current asset. Other than this, it is allocated to the goodwill and other assets on a pro rata basis. So for example, if the carrying value is 10,000 and the recoverable amount is your 12,000, so in this case the impairment loss which he has to adjust it against the goodwill, which was 10,000, we have to 10,000 impairment loss, and the balance, that is of 12,000 less 10,000, we have to adjust this 2,000 and pro rata basis on the balance of this other asset. So for example, I'm taking with you one example for understanding. This is an example. So earlier what happened, that there are assets the organization has, such as goodwill, building, machinery 1, furniture, machinery 2, and the carrying value of this goodwill is 10,000 and others as shown. Like for building 12,000, machinery 1 20,000, machinery 2 12,000, and furniture 14,000, which gives you a figure of 68,000. Amount is expressed in dollars. Okay, so the impairment loss for calculation, we require to know what is your value in use and fair value less cost of disposal. So in this case, the fair value less cost of disposal was 60,000 and your value in use was 61,000. So the recoverable amount is $61,000, which is the higher of the two, fair value less cost of disposal and value in use. And we have to see what is the carrying value. The carrying value as shown here is 68,000. So in this case, the impairment loss gives you a figure of 70,000. How we derived here is this comparison between the two, fair value and value in use, taking the higher and checking it with your carrying value, and the balance is 7,000. So we can see here 7,000, which is your G16 minus G15. And later, since impairment loss was 7,000, we have attributable all the amount of the impairment loss to the goodwill figure. Why? Because the value of the goodwill was 10,000 as the carrying value, and impairment loss was only your 7,000. So we taken whole amount in this, in your goodwill, whole amount. Okay. And later we have to take the balances, the differences between the two. So goodwill, which was carrying value 10,000, impairment loss was 7,000, got reduced to 3,000. This 3,000 is your carrying value, that is the recoverable amount, because the impairment loss states that if the carrying value is more than the recoverable amount, the carrying value has to be reduced to the recoverable amount, and the recoverable amount is your carrying value of which is to be shown in your statement of financial position, that is a balance sheet, under the asset, non-current asset, and intangibles, and under balance, that is the under 7,000 impairment loss has to be charged to your impairment loss in your profit and loss. So this way the 7,000 got debited to your P&L, profit and loss, and your income got lower by this amount, the profit got lower. And later then the building, other assets will not be marked for the impairment loss, because only the 7,000 was the amount which you are charged it to the goodwill. So here 7,000, which is your cell number F19, and the balance of impairment loss nil. Taking with one more example. So this is your figure of what 20 20x0, and this will be a figure of 20x1. Now we are taking with another example. Here in 2000x9, the figure of the assets were as follow: 10,000 goodwill, building 12,000, machinery 1 20,000, 2 12,000, furniture 14,000, net current assets 10,000. So this gives you a total of 78,000. Then the impairment loss, we have to identify the amount and the recoverable amount. Here it was given that the fair value less cost of disposal was 65,000 and the value in use was 62,345. However, in this case, I have taken this hypothetical figures and recoverable value is suppose 65,000, which is the higher of the two. So this is your higher of the two, that is your fair value less cost of disposal and value in use. So this use a 65,000, which is the higher, which we have to see compare with your carrying value, which was 78,000, and so the carrying value is more than the recoverable value, and thus the impairment is there in the asset, and the impairment loss amount is the difference between the carrying value and the recoverable value, which is your cell G35 less G34, gives you a figure of 13,000. This impairment loss has to be proportion as first with the goodwill and the second with the balance on pro rata basis. So here the impairment loss is charged to the goodwill to the amount which was being there. Here the carrying value is 10,000. So the impairment loss is restricted to the 10,000. And so it doesn't use any recoverable value for 2000x0 here because everything is being impaired. For the other assets, what we have to do, we have to ignore the value of goodwill. And your net current asset, net current asset. So here we have eliminated from the 78,000 your goodwill figure, which was 10,000, and the net current asset. So which gives you a total of 78,000 minus your cell, which gives you a total of 58,000. How it is being derived is we have ignored the value of goodwill and the net current asset. So it leaves a cell 78,000 which and reduce it by the cell E29, which is your net current asset, and E24, which is your goodwill. So this way we have taken the 58,000, and now what we will be doing is adjusting whole amount of impairment to the goodwill, and later we have to see that amount of E25, which is your E goodwill figure, divided by the total figure, which was your 58,000. This 58,000, 12,000, and your balance goodwill impairment loss, which was 3,000. These three figures. After adjusting the impairment loss figure with the goodwill, it is left with 3,000. So we have solved it by the 12,000 E25 divided by E42, which is your 58,000, and multiply this by the remaining impairment loss of 3,000. So this way our impairment loss is calculated, and here we repeats the same for the other assets. And the recoverable amount of the 20x0 is your carrying value 2000x9 less impairment loss. So these are their figures. So like 12,000, and we have added here because the figures of impairment loss are taken negative, else it is like fair value less impairment loss. So here the remarks are there, remarks such as max to the goodwill amount, full amount, take the denominator by denominator 78,000, which we have identified here. Sorry, I taken 56,000, you make it 58,000. So now this is perfect. For 20x1 impairment loss reversal, now there is a reversal. What I informed you that impairment if already charged, and now if the because of the recoverable value was lower than the carrying value, however this recoverable value in this 20x1 has increased and it has went to around 75,000, which was earlier year 65,000. So there is an upper trend. So impairment doesn't comes here. Here the reversal of impairment is there. So impairment loss reversal is we cannot reverse the goodwill figure. So we have to keep this amount as nil. So the recoverable amount which was earlier in 20x0 nil, we have to keep the same amount in your recoverable amount of 20x1. I'm moving here this. Then for this the amount of the recoverable amount is here F25. F25 how we found is we have taken the whole amount which we have charged as an impairment loss, we have reversed it. So the earlier negative figure gets positive. Same with others. I'm marking just one. Now the recoverable amount is here, this figure plus this figure gives you the figure of the recoverable, which is your value in your balance sheet of the asset. So this way, like 11,379, which was year 20x0 figure, with addition to the sum of reversal of impairment loss 620, gives you a total figure of 12,000. And this way our total is of 68,000. Now you may say that 68,000 is your value. This becomes your carrying value of year 20x1. So this value we have to keep it in your balance sheet, and recoverable value is your 75,000. So let it be. So here in this case is your impairment is, you can see that impairment loss is not there, because impairment loss is when your carrying amount is greater than the recoverable amount, and in this case the carrying amount is lower than the recoverable value. So impairment is not there, and this is the case of the reversal of impairment loss which was charged earlier. So this is the very important, and this is applicable in your both strategic business reporting as well as your accounts as well as your auditing standard, because audit and accounts goes in hand to hand. Now the frequency of impairment. The frequency of impairment is exist, and the indication as discussed earlier. An annual impairment testing is done for goodwill and intangible asset with having indefinite useful life or not yet available for use. This is also the important when the impairment testing is to be checked, and when the impairment is tested, like for what annually and what for and reporting date. This comes often in your AAA, Advanced Auditing and Assurance. Examiner asks such questions like annually is for intangible asset, indefinite useful life and not yet available for use, and goodwill. The impairment checking frequency of impairment, this is also important. A disclosure, proper disclosures needs to be there for the impairment. So this may come that the disclosure is not made by the management. So what is the risk? The audit risk is that if the management doesn't make any proper disclosure, it will affect the reliance of the users on the who depend on the financial statement, because their investment decision is based on such financial statements, and the auditor has to make a proper opinion if these disclosures are not made. If the disclosures are not made, then it will materially distort the reliance of the users on the financial statement, and it will be a risk which was covered earlier. So this was some of the important things, and now I'm starting again, moving back to the article. A summary of the key financial reporting principle of IAS 36 is provided below. An asset is impaired if its carrying value is higher than the recoverable amount, which you have already studied. The recoverable amount of an asset is the higher of the value in use, and the fair value less cost of disposal, which we have already covered. Where an asset is impaired, it should be written down to its recoverable amount, and generally that the loss should be taken to the statement of profit and loss. Yes, because this impairment is here comes in your P&L debit side, and it reduces the profit. An impairment review is done when there indicators of impairment arises, which we already discussed. There is a specific rule to perform annual impairment review on intangible with indefinite useful life, intangible asset not yet available for use, and purchase of goodwill. We already know that where an asset cannot be assessed for the recoverable amount individually, it can be assessed as a part of the cash generating unit. For where this is done, the impairment is written off against the asset of the cash generating unit by allocating first against the goodwill and then against other asset on a pro rata basis. But note, asset should be reduced below the higher of the value less cost of disposal or value in use. We already covered this. So now moving with a recent example from the sample March-June 2017, question number 4. Here it was being asked that you are the manager responsible for the audit of the Osier company, a jewelry manufacturer and a retailer. The financial asset of the year ended 31st March 2017 is nearly the completion stage. So this is not yet completed, it is nearing the completion. And you are reviewing the audit of the working paper. The total assets figure of 2017 and compared with 2016 is given, along with the revenue figure and the profit before tax. At the year end, the management performed an impairment review of its retail outlet, which are cash generating unit, of the purpose for conducting the impairment review. While internet sales grew rapidly during the year, sales from retail outlet has declined. So this is the case of impairment, because there is a decline. As 31st March 2017, the carrying amount of the asset directly attributable to retail outlets total to $137 million. This includes both tangible assets and goodwill. During the year, the management received a number of offers from parties interested in purchasing the retail outlets for an average of $125 million. They also estimated the disposal cost to be $1.5 million based upon their experience of corporate acquisition and disposal. Management estimated the value in use to be $128 million. This was to be based on the historic cash flow attributable to retail outlet inflated at a general rate of 1% per annum. This, they argued, reflect a poor performance of the retail outlet. Consequently, the retail outlets were impaired by $9 million to restate them to their estimated recoverable value of $128 million. The impairment was allocated against the tangible asset of the outlets on a pro rata basis. based on the original carrying amount of each asset unit, which was asked for the 7 mark. So what we have understood from this question is that the total assets of the organization were $1919 million. The revenue was $1052 million. Profit before tax $107 million. Carrying amount $137 million. Fair value of the asset was $125 million and the disposal cost was $1.5 million. So we have to reduce the fair value less cost of disposal, which is here $125 million less $1.5 million, which gives you a figure of $123.5 million. And the value in use was $128 million. So value in use is more than the fair value less cost of disposal. So the recoverable value is $128 million. The impairment loss is $9 million, which is the recoverable value less carrying amount, $137 less $128 million, which gives an impairment loss of $9 million. An impairment was allocated against the tangible asset of the outlet on a pro rata basis. $9 million, this materiality level. So the impairment loss is $9 million. Now we have to check with the materiality level, which with can be with the total asset, revenue, profit before tax. So we have taken the value of the impairment loss and we have divided it by the total asset and profit before tax. And these are your materiality level, like 0.468, rounded off to 2 digit 0.47 percentage of the total asset. And that is of, so it is material to profit before tax because it is 8.41 percentage. So now what the examiner has asked, in this question you can open with the materiality of the impairment, which has already been done. 9 percentage represent 0.47 percentage of the total asset and 8.41 percentage of the profit before tax, and is material to the profit or loss. This carries 1 mark, and the conclusion that it is material or not, this carries 1 mark with the calculation. You should then state the underlying rule of an indicator of the impairment trigger and impairment review and define the impairment and recoverable amount. So this again carry a 1 mark. So just taking the bold because that is more important. So what are the key risks and the matters which should be considered? Management has estimated the cost of sale. Here you can see that the management has estimated. Management performed carrying amount of the retail outlet. This includes during the year management received a number of offers. They also estimated. The estimated is given here. See, you can see my cursor. Just 1 minute. Has this I highlighted it. The management has estimated the cost of disposal based upon the management further estimate. Here also it is given that the management estimated the value in use to be. This was based on your historic cash flow. Again, this is a risk because it should be on the future cash flow and not on the basis of historic cash flow. So these are some important which I have highlighted it. So these are estimates, and estimates are inherently risky and is not certain. It is estimated by the management who will be biased because they can give a wrong estimation based on the pressurized from the management, based on the incentives pressurization, and they want to show the good profit position, financial position. They may window dress the position, and these are estimates are already estimate based on the judgmental factors, that is of the human, and the human that prone to the error. So estimates are inherently risky and it is estimated and it can be biased. So this is one kind of risk. The value in use is major source of risk. The calculation is complex. You know that the calculation of this is complex. that the calculation we did here is risky. So this can be a part. The calculation is complex and the judgment and so inherently risky. It has been calculated by the management who may be biased or keep the impairment loss as low as possible. The calculation was based on the historical cash flow, which appears unrealistic given that the retail sales have fallen, not grown by 1%. Unrealistic because the inflation is here 1% and the sales should increase, but the sales are reducing, so this can be unrealistic. If the forecast is over optimistic, then the impairment write off is insufficient and therefore the assets are overstated and the profit is overstated. If the forecast is over optimistic, the management can give us a good forecast when the actual is not the same. That the plan and the forecast and the estimates and the actual position may differ, and this differ because the over optimist forecast is given. So now the risk 3, the treatment of the impairment write-off may be incorrect as goodwill should be reduced before reducing the asset. As we have known that the goodwill should be first be allocated to the impairment and later the other assets on a pro rata basis. It was being given by the management that they have pro rata basis, that the tangible assets of the athlete on the pro rata basis based upon the each value in the unit. There nothing mentioned about the goodwill. They should be first identified against the goodwill and later. So this is, and again the risk. The treatment of the impairment write-off may be incorrect as the goodwill should be reduced before reducing the assets on a pro rata basis, and it should be ensured that no individual asset is reduced to below its own recoverable amount. And so now I have taken these highlighted items because the examiner has stated the matter part of the question is illustrated within the boxes above, and answer points which focus on these risk areas will attract and gain a good maximum credit for the part of the question. The examiner further states that as this was the matter and evidence question, remember that you also need to go on explain evidences. This evidence are already covering, so there is a available on YouTube. You will expect to find the audit file. The requirement is for the evidence to be explained in this question, so listing sources of evidence is not sufficient. Your answer point must also explain what are the providing evidence of in order to attract high marks. So only we have to not list, we have to tell why it is the evidence. I will cover this. I have covered already. You can go through my session. If you write out evidences as a list of described procedures, then this will be acceptable and well described. Relevant procedures will generally receive marks. So now I'm moving with another accounting standard, which is your intangible asset. Well, this is your Article 3, Associate for Chartered Certified Accountant, Advanced Auditing and Assurance for the professional level, intangible asset. This is again an interesting standard, and the definitions of the intangible assets, identifiable future economic benefits and control we will be learning in this. So what is an intangible? They are the identifiable non-monetary asset without having a physical substance. So what are the examples of intangible assets? Such as they are patents, copyrights, computer software, licenses, intellectual properties, such as the technical knowledge obtained from development activity, trademarks including brand names and published titles, motion pictures, So now what is an asset? Intangible we understood, but what is an asset? An asset is a resource which is controlled by an entity, and it arises from your past events, and future economic benefits are expected to flow to the entity. So an asset is basically been controlled by an entity as a result of past events, and it has the future economic benefits and are expected to flow to the entity who owns them. So this is your intangible as well as your intangible asset. Like intangible is your identifiable, non-monetary, and they do not have the physical substance. So now starting with the identifiable. Identifiable is something which is separable. It is carries a contractual rights, and it is a legal rights. They have the legal right. And the future economic benefits are basically your net cash flows. And the control is something which the organization should control them, the intangible assets, then only it can be recognized. So now moving with the recognition and initial measurement. An intangible asset should be recognized when it complies with the definition of intangible asset as we learnt here, and it meets the recognition criteria, that is there is a probable future economic benefit. This is important, that it is a probable, and a cost of measurement can be there, because for example 10,000 intangible asset, the cost is reliable, then it can be recognized. If there is no such cost, then it is not considered. So for example, the goodwill, intangible goodwill which is purchased, it is recognized as an your intangible asset because it carries a cost. There is a future probable economic benefits, like goodwill increases your reputation, which has a good impact on your sales, profit, stability, position, good for the organization and other stakeholders. For the investors also it is good because they are investing in such company which has a good reputation in the market. That is the goodwill, and it complies with the definition of intangible because goodwill is something which is not seen. However, it has the potentiality that it will give a future economic benefits, and it is owned by the organization. However, if the goodwill is self-generated, then the self-generated doesn't have the own value which can be reliable. So this is away from the scope of recognition. An intangible asset should always be measured initially at the cost. Can employees be shown as intangible asset? So what do you feel? Like full-time employees can leave the organization. So for example, if you are employed somewhere, then you can leave the organization as and when you require to. There is giving a notice period, and after that there is no control over the employees like you. So it is not covered under your intangible asset, because though the company is gaining a good economic benefits from you through your services, they consider you as a resources which are important for the organization work, but still they are not controlling you. You can do anything within the rules regulations. But if the person is contractual employee, then there is a contract that he cannot leave within that stipulated period of time, and there may be a contractual rules, regulations, obligations also. So here there is a control comes. So those employees which are non-contracted, they can be, for example, a football player person, they sign a contract with the teams, and later so they are your intangible assets. Recognition and intangible measurement. Well, there are initial recognition as well as your subsequent recognition. In initial recognition, it includes the materials, such as there are some values which are included, like material, services, purchase price, import duties, legal fees, amortization of licenses, non-refundable purchase taxes, trade discount, rebate, directly attributable cost of preparing the asset for its intended use. And there are some which are excluded from the recognition and initial measurement, like introducing a new product or services, including the advertising. Now this cost which you pay for the advertising is not is excluded, or we are promoting certain product services, these are not considered to be the cost and they are excluded, because they are used for introducing a new product and services which are excluded specifically. Conducting a business in new location with new class of customer. Any shiftment movement in the current business from one place to another location where is conducting a new business, so this is also excluded from the scope of the recognition and initial measurement. If there are admin expenses or general overhead, so these are also not being excluded, these are also excluded, they are not included. However, if the expenses are specific general overhead, then they are okay to be considered, like we have considered material, services, purchase price, imports, non-refundable purchase taxes, because these are specifically incurred for bringing that asset to the location. However, the general overheads are marked away from this, sunk overheads away from the recognition, initial operating cost and losses, they are also away. So the recognition, and this is also very important in your syllabus for the advanced auditing and assurance, like internally generated goodwill, no value shall be recognized, because as informed you earlier that this can be filled, there is no reliable value and it is away from the recognition, as we have seen here. Probable economic benefits, but the value cannot be measured reliably. So this way, because of this, the intangible assets is away from your recognition. Others intangible assets, identifiable assets, probable future economic benefits, reliable measurement which are at cost, because initial measurement should be done at the cost, as we already studied here. Intangible assets should be measured initially at cost. Here this at cost. So this way, then we are moving ahead. So this is very important. Again, many case studies are asked on this, like research. Those expenses which are in the nature of the research phase, they are expense as incurred in your profit and loss. They are not capitalized, and those are away from your intangible assets. However, if they met the development conditions, capitalized once meeting the recognition criteria. So what is this recognition criteria? Well, there are many points which you have to learn, such as availability of adequate financial, technical and other resources to complete the development and sell the intangible asset, intention of completion of the intangible asset, ability to use or sell the intangible asset, generate probable future economic benefits, and measurement of the expenditure reliable. We can learn it through the short form of prime, like P. For P here we can see that it is coming in here probable future economic benefits. So for P, probable. For R, it should be available of adequate technical and financial and other resources. So from R, we can see that there should be resources. What can be the resources? It can be technical, financial and other resources. Now I, intention to complete the intangible asset. From M, management shall have the ability to use or sell the intangible asset. And E, measure the expenditure attributable to the intangible asset. So this way we can keep in mind with the use of prime. For P, it's probable. For R, there shall be resources. From I, intention to complete. From M, management ability to use or sell the intangible asset. And from E, expenditure, measure the expenditure attributable to intangible asset. So now moving to the measurement after the recognition. The intangible asset can be done through the cost or evaluation model for measurement after the recognition, because it is for initial recognition it is always at cost, and for subsequent recognition it can be either at the cost or revaluation model. So for cost, the cost less accumulated amortization and impairment losses, this becomes your cost. And for the R, that is the revaluation model, there should be an active fair value and the active market, and it can be measured by references, and the revalued amount, which is the fair value at the date of revaluation less any subsequent accumulated amortization and accumulated impairment losses. So what is important in revaluation model is that there should be an active market. The fair value of revalued intangible asset must be measured. So this is important. Well, the rest like cost less accumulated amortization and any accumulated impairment losses, and this first point of the revaluation model are both similar. So for cost, remember cost less accumulated amortization less accumulated impairment losses becomes your cost model. And for the revaluation model, again the same, cost less amortization less accumulated impairment losses. Along with this, there shall be an active market. So what happens if the revaluation model? So this I will be informing you with the example which you will be able to understand. So moving with the example. Well, this is your example. There are two cases, option 1 and option 2, and that is your year 2, and option 1.1, 1.2, 2.1 and 2.2 in your year 3. So let's start. A revaluation model, we need to keep the asset at its fair value. Suppose if we purchase an asset for the year 1 at 10,000, and here if the value in year 2 becomes 12,000, so there is a increase of 2,000 in the year 2 based on compared with year 1 figure. So the difference of 2,000 should be charged to your other comprehensive income. We will understand the accounting treatment. Since the value in year 2 has increased by 2,000 from 10,000 to 12,000, we are debiting the asset as it is showing an upward trend. So the value of the asset is increased to 2,000. So we are debiting the asset, and the balance, since it is an upward trend, we are crediting to other comprehensive income, which becomes your part of your equity. Let's compare this with your accounting. So in the revaluation model, what is there? Value increase. The increase shall be recognized in other comprehensive income and accumulated in equity under the heading of revaluation surplus. So we are right that the increase upper trend goes to your other comprehensive income, that is your OCI, and accumulated in your equity under the heading of revaluation surplus. So now there is one more example, that in option 2 what happened, that moving the value which was 10,000 earlier of the land has reduced to 8,000. So again there is a difference of 2,000, but this is a shortfall, SHOTFALL. Okay, so the shortfall should be charged to the profit and loss, and since there is a declining in the value of the asset, we have to credit. For increasing the asset, if we have debited it, we have to credit it when the value is declined by 2000. So we have credited the asset and we have charged it to debit and losses, P&L, because debit all expenses and losses, credit all gains and income. So we have debited it to profit and loss. So here it will be like the value has decreased. The decrease shall be recognized in your profit or loss. So we have covered the first point of both, value increase if and value decreased when. Moving further to the year 3. So in year 3 what happened? The value which was increased by 12,000 by 2,000 has further increased to the value of 14,000. So from 12 to 14, again there is a upper trend of 2,000 in the value of the asset. Since the asset value is increasing, we have debited the asset, and since for the upper trend we have seen that it should be recognized in other comprehensive income, we have taken this to other comprehensive income. So this way we can, for upper trend, it should be credited to the other comprehensive income and debited to the OCI. But here what happened in the option 1.2, that is here another instance, that in year 3 the value has further decreased. From 12,000 the value has now decreased to 8,000. So there is a difference of 4,000 from 12 to 8, 4,000 difference. So here we have to credit the asset by 4,000 because it has shown a negative trend. It has shown the value that it has decreased. So we are writing here, and but here we can see that in other comprehensive income, as shown in your option 1, year 2, we have a credit balance lying of 2,000. So this is an reversal case. So the credit balance of OCI is now goes to the debit side by the same amount, 2,000, and the balance, if any, here we write balance if any, goes to your if and balance if any goes to your profit and loss. So we can get the correct entry as debit OCI, which was earlier there in your option 1, year 2. We are reversing the same 2,000. We are now debiting the profit and loss by 2,000 and we are crediting the asset by 4,000. And in option 2.1 what happened? So we are moving it to the case value increase. However, the increase shall be recognized in profit and loss to the extent that it reverses a revaluation decrease of the same asset previously recognized in profit or loss. So here we are reducing the value and we are taking it to the profit and loss if the balance exists. First taking to the OCI the balance, by adjusting the amount of the decline, and the remaining goes to the profit and loss. And this value decrease is like a vice versa, like the reversal. Like, however, the decrease shall be recognized in other comprehensive income to the extent of any credit balance in the revaluation surplus in respect of that asset. So what I meant to say here is that here in option 2.1, in year 3, the value which was earlier in year 2, the value declined to 8,000, has now further declined to 6,000. So there is a difference of 2,000 from 8 to 6. We have to debit it to profit and loss 2000, and we have to credit it the asset 2000. So year 2000 and year 2000, and here adjusting entry goes. Now what happening in option 2.2, in the year 3 the value has further increased, means it has increased now from a shortfall of 8,000 to a upper trend of 12,000. So the value has increased 4,000. Here we reverses the losses. So what will be the entry is debit the asset by what amount? The difference between the 12,000 and your 8,000. So we taken here. Now this OCI, no, sorry, we were having a credit balance, we were having a debit balance in profit and loss of 2,000, which we are taking here to the 2,000, and the balance we are moving this to the other comprehensive income. Okay, I hope that everyone has understood. So when a value is decreased, I already informed that it should be charged first to the profit and loss and later to the other comprehensive income. So this is your adjustment revaluation model. Cost model is simple: cost less amortization less impairment, if any. Moving to the useful life, the useful life of an intangible asset shall be assessed as finite or indefinite. If finite, useful life is assessed as a period of time or number of production of similar items. If infinite and indefinite useful life is when there is no foreseeable future limit to the period over which the asset is expected to generate a net cash inflows. And the factors to be considered in determining the useful life include your expected usage of the asset by the entity, typical production life cycle for the asset, public information, technical, technological, commercial, other obsolescences, expected actions. So what is more important is this: if the asset is for indefinite useful life, no depreciation should be provided, however amortization should be provided, however it should be checked for impairment. And here for the indefinite useful life, we are also to check, review whether the value, whether the useful life has now come to the finite useful life. We have to check that. That is important, because if it is coming in your finite life, then the accounting is differs, because depreciation is also has to be provided. So if the finite useful life is there, then the amortization is over the useful life, and it is tested for impairment when there is an indication. However, if the life is indefinite, then we test for impairment annually, and when there is an indication of the asset that they are being impaired. However, they are not amortized over the useful life, and therefore a need is there to check whether the indefinite life is still existing for the indefinite useful life, or if it has come to the finite useful life, because finite, as informed earlier. Now we are taking with the example 2 of the intangibles. And intangible assets are non-monetary assets without physical substance, such as patents, trademark, customer leased, quotas, brands, franchisees, agreements, etc. A summary of the key financial information is the principles is provided as below. Intangible assets must be identifiable, controlled, provide future economic benefits. In order to be recognized as an asset, there must be probable future economic benefit arising from the asset, and the cost must be capable of reliable measurement. If this is not possible, then expenditure on the asset must be recognized as an expense. This is why the generated brands and the customer leased are not allowed to be recognized, but purchased ones can be included. The same thing which I have already informed you. Now, the subsequent treatment of the intangible assets with either on a historical basis or on a fair value method, if it is possible that the fair value can be defined by reference of an active market, example production quotas, so on. Now, exam focus, we have already learned this, so not taking again, just reading from the article which the examiner has written in your ACCA, Associate for Chartered Certified Accountant for Advanced Auditing and Profession. Now moving to the exam focus, by definition of the brands, they are unique and therefore it will not be possible to compare an active market. Hence, the fair value model does not apply and they cannot be revalued upward. The examiner has also covered that the intangible assets will either have a finite life, a limited period of benefit to the company over which the asset will be amortized, with the amortization expenses being charged to profit and loss. This has already been discussed that if amortization it comes to a profit and loss, or an indefinite life when no foreseeable limit of the period of economic benefit exists, hence no amortization is charged. Therefore, for indefinite life, what we have to know that amortization is not charged. Where an asset is deemed to have an indefinite life, it is not amortized, but their useful life need to be reviewed every reporting period to determine whether the events continue to support an indefinite life. And additionally, the asset should be assessed for impairment each reporting year. So this is already being discussed that there should be impairment, also the test of whether they have still the indefinite life or they have moved to the definite life, because definite amortization. That's why all intangible assets are subjected to impairment review where there is an indicator of impairment. Impairment testing has to be done. So this is a recent exam sample, March June 2000 X, question number 1. This is an extract from the planning question which was asked to the candidate to evaluate the risk and material misstatement arising from the scenario when the group holds several purchased brand names of products. There is an acquired brand name are held at cost and not amortized on the grounds that the assets have an indefinite life. Annual impairment review are conducted on all brands. The brand was determined to be impaired by $30 million due to the allegations made in the press and the customers that some ingredients used in the brand range can cause skin irritation and serious health problem. The brand products have withdrawal from the sale. So how can be the mark? When answering the requirement to evaluate risk from the scenario relating to the specific accounting issues, you should start by calculating the materiality. We can start the materiality. What was the materiality? And later we can determine it is material by what. You know the materiality level. You should then start the underlying the accounting rule. An acquired brand name should be capitalized and amortized over the useful life. And you know guys, where this is an indefinite, no amortization is required. However, an annual review of the appropriateness of the assumption of indefinite life should be performed, and annual impairment test is required to be performed. How this should be written up in the risk question has been illustrated in the second article in this article in the series. However, here the company has decided to hold brand at cost. They deem they to have an indefinite life. This is an acceptable treatment under your IS 38. However, the important point of the standard which you need to consider is that this should also be done if there is no foreseeable limit in the future of the benefit. They are also requirement that this assumption should be reviewed annually and additional in impairment review be performed. The scenario tells us that the impairment review has been performed, but note that review of the indefinite life has occurred. Hence, there is an risk that this may not have been done. That decision to hold a brand with an indefinite life is judgment call on behalf of the management. Judgments are subjective and therefore a source of inherent risk. You know that assumptions are risky. That decision to hold a brand with an indefinite life is judgment call on behalf of the management. Judgments are subjective and therefore are a source of inherent risk. Quite often, the justification for such a decision shall be linked back to expenditure on the brand and marketing efforts along with the market research. This cost cannot be capitalized but do provide evidence to support the indefinite. So this what the examiner want to say, that the same point that the estimates are decided by the management. These are subjective and therefore a source of inherent risk. However, sometimes it is given that quite a justification of such a decision will be linked back to the expenditure on the brand and marketing efforts along with the market research. This cost cannot be capitalized but to provide evidence to support the indefinite useful life. Because this research, as I told, that what items should be included and what not. So this is the expenditure which should be not included because they are used for market research and those costs are not covered. Impairment review for brand will be looking at the value in used based on the discounted value of the future expected cash flow, which is complex and judgmental. Well, what the examiner want to say, that the present value which we have removed here, this is this yeah, so this is here complex and it carries a risk. So this only the examiner is saying that this is complex and it can be risky and it and may not have been done. So how it has been found the value, so that you need to write in the exams. The decision to hold a brand with an indefinite useful life is the judgmental call on behalf of the management. These are subjective and the source of inherent risk. Quite often, justification for such a decision will be linked back to the expenditure on the brand and marketing efforts along with the market research. This cost cannot be capitalized but do provide evidence to support the indefinite life. They're already covered, right? Okay, sorry. So there are three risks. Management judgment that brand have an indefinite life may be incorrect. So what is the basis on which they are determined? Is there any suggestion statement? So they have to check, else it is a risky. Management may not be reviewed the useful life of the brand in reporting period to ensure that the assumption of indefinite life is still correct. So this is again a point. The management impairment review may be not be accurate as they are the assumption used by the management may not be appropriate as the calculation is complex and the judgmental, that is common point in this. The impairment of the Chico brand may not be sufficient. Why? Can't tell if it has been fully written down. The impairment, whether check whether the impairment was being properly done, whether the fair value is being properly recognized, whether they are being properly identified, the research phase, development phase, recognition, initial, subsequent, so on. We can't tell if it has been fully written down. Whether that is means that the impairment has been done or not, we don't know. And whether the impairment has been written down with the correct value, correct amount. The inventory relating to the brand may need to be written off if its net realizable value is below cost. That is, sometimes it may happen that there is a demand fall, the supply fall, the sales fall, then there is a chances that the net realizable value is below the cost. So in such cases, the inventory relating to the brand has to be written down, and if it is not written, so this possesses a risk. Again, the risk is that the other brands and inventory may be affected negatively publicity regarding the brand and may not need to be written down, because one brand is following and there is a market, so it will, one brand is affected, then it will unnecessarily blame the other brands also. Probability, not surety, probable that other brands and inventory may be affected by the negative publicity regarding the brand and may need to be written down. So the exam focus is that no credit is awarded for numbering or naming the standard while auditing and financial reporting. You should avoid describing audit approach or evidence provided unless, means like, if the question is not asked to write your approaches, evidences or procedures, then in such cases you should not be writing them. Only when the examiner asks, you should write it. And now the examiner concludes with the statement that the above example is to demonstrate how candidates can apply their accounting knowledge in the advanced auditing and assurance exam for gaining the marks in the question asked by the examiner. And this can be also covered under your planning and the evidences consideration. As audit and assurance exams, if it is application of the accounting knowledge being asked in your case study asked by the examiner and not the rote knowledge, the assumption should be stick to the case study requirement, and it should not be hypothetical or unnecessary assumption should not be taken. This means that when the preparing for this exam, it helps the student in having a good understanding knowledge of the accounting knowledge, and that's why the examiner has written this article. And this is very important, and also suggest that to to practice much questions so that it will be helpful for them to write their exams and pass it successfully. So this was all about your article P7.